Hi friends, it's your teen and tween librarian Rebecca, and we're back for another episode of Bedtime Stories. Last episode, Axel and his uncle got into a very big discussion on how they were going to take this journey. Well, basically the professor had some ideas on how, and it took the entire chapter for Axel to be convinced. So this chapter, we're going to see Axel take a walk and really think about what's happening. And spoiler alert, we finally get to meet the pretty Virlandaise Gräuben, and we'll get to see what she thinks about this whole situation. All right, let's enjoy Chapter 7. Chapter 7, Getting Ready. So ended that memorable conversation, leaving me with a sort of fever. I came out of my uncle's study in a daze, and there was not enough air in the streets of Hamburg to set me right again. I therefore made for the banks of the Elbe, where the ferry steamer links the town with the Harburg Railway. Was I convinced of the truth of what I had just heard? Hadn't I been swayed by Professor Liedenbrock? Was I to take seriously his declared intention to penetrate the center of the world? Had I been listening to the mad speculations of a lunatic or to the scientific conclusions of a genius? Where in all this did truth stop and error begin? I drifted about among 1,000 contradictory hypotheses without succeeding in grasping a single one. Yet I remembered that I had felt convinced, even if my enthusiasm was beginning to cool down, and I would have liked to set off at once without giving myself time to think. Yes, at that moment, I would have had the courage to pack my bag. But an hour later, I must admit that this excitement of mine abated. My nerves relaxed, and from the depths of the earth, I rose once more to the surface. "It's ridiculous," I exclaimed. "There's no sense in it. It isn't the sort of proposal to put to a sensible young man. The whole thing must be a mistake. I've slept badly and had a nightmare." In the meantime, I had followed the bank of the Elbe and gone round the town. After passing the port again, I had reached the Altona road. A presentiment was guiding me, which was fully justified, for soon I had caught sight of my little Gräuben walking briskly towards Hamburg. "Gräuben!" I called out to her when I was some distance away. The girl stopped, rather startled, I imagine, at hearing her name called on the high road. A dozen strides, and I was at her side. "Axel!" she exclaimed in surprise. "Oh, you have come to meet me. That was nice of you." However, when she looked at me, Gräuben noticed my worried, anxious expression. "What's the matter?" she asked, holding out her hand. "What's the matter, Gräuben?" I echoed. A couple of minutes and 3 sentences were sufficient to put my pretty Virlandaise in possession of the facts. I don't know whether her heart was beating like mine, but her hand did not tremble in mine. We walked about 100 yards without speaking. "Axel," she said at last. "Yes, my dear Gräuben?" "It will be a wonderful journey." I gave a start at these words. "Yes, Axel, a journey worthy of a scientist's nephew. It is a good thing for a man to distinguish himself by some great enterprise." "What, Gräuben? You mean you aren't going to advise me against an expedition like that?" "No, my dear Axel, and I would gladly come with your uncle and you, if it weren't that a girl would only be in the way." "I don't agree with that." "You mean that?" "Yes, I mean it." Oh, how hard it is to understand the hearts of girls and women. When they are not the most timid of creatures, they are the bravest. I do agree with that. Reason has no part in their lives. This girl was encouraging me to take part in that expedition and would not have been afraid to join it herself. And she was pushing me into it, even though she was in love with me. I was disconcerted, and to tell the truth, ashamed of myself. "Gräuben," I said, We shall see whether you talk like this tomorrow. Tomorrow, my dear Axel, I shall speak exactly as I have done today. Hand in hand, but saying nothing more, Gräuben and I continued on our way. I was tired out by the day's emotions. After all, I thought to myself, the kalends of July are still a long way off, and a great many things may happen in the meantime to cure my uncle of his mania for underground exploration. Darkness had fallen by the time we reached the house in the Königstrasse. I expected to find the place quiet, my uncle in bed as usual, and Martha giving the dining room a final flick with her feather duster. But I had reckoned without the professor's impatience. I found him shouting and gesticulating in the midst of a crowd of men who were unloading goods on the path. Our old servant was at her wit's end. "Come along, Axel!" exclaimed my uncle as soon as he saw me. "Hurry up! Your box isn't packed! My papers aren't in order! I can't find the key to my bag, and my gaiters haven't arrived!" I was thunderstruck. My voice failed me. I could only just murmur the words. Are we going, then? "Yes, you young idiot! And you will go for a walk instead of staying here." "We're going?" I repeated in an even feebler voice. "Yes, first thing the day after tomorrow." I could not bear to hear any more, and I fled to my little room. There was no longer any doubt about it. My uncle had spent the afternoon buying some of the things he needed for his journey, and the path was littered with enough rope ladders, knotted cords, torches, flasks, grappling irons, alpenstocks, iron-shod sticks, and pickaxes to burden at least a dozen men. I spent a dreadful night. The next morning, I was called early. I had made up my mind not to open the door. How could I resist the sweet voice which uttered these words? "My dear Axel?" I came out of my room, thinking that my haggard features, my pale complexion, and my eyes reddened by lack of sleep would arouse Gräuben's sympathy and change her ideas. "Ah, my dear Axel," she said, "I see that you are feeling better and that a night's rest has done you good." "Done me good!" I exclaimed. I rushed to my mirror. Well, the fact was that I did look better than I had expected. I could scarcely believe my eyes. "Axel," said Gräuben, "I have had a long talk with my guardian. He is a bold thinker and a man of great courage, and you must remember that his blood flows in your veins. He has told me about his plans and hopes and explained why and how he expects to attain his object. He will succeed, I have no doubt of that. Oh, Axel, it is such a wonderful thing to devote oneself to science like that. What glory there is in store for Herr Liedenbrock and for his companion. When you come back, Axel, you will be a man, his equal, free to speak and act as you wish, and free to—" She stopped short and blushed. Her words revived my spirits. All the same, I still refused to believe in our departure. I took Gräuben along to the professor's study. "Uncle," I said, "are we really going?" "Why, have you any doubts?" "No," I said, not wanting to vex him. "Only I don't see what their need is to hurry." "Think of time! Time flying with irreparable speed." "But it's only the 26th of May, and from now until the end of June. You ignoramus! Do you think it's as easy as all that to get to Iceland? If you hadn't gone off like a fool, I'd have taken you with me to the Copenhagen office of Liffender and Company. There you would have seen that there's only one service from Copenhagen to Reykjavik, and on the 22nd of each month." Well, if we waited until the 22nd of June, we should arrive too late to see the shadow of Scartaris touch the crater of Sneffels. So we have to get to Copenhagen as fast as we can to find some means of transport. Go and pack your things." There was no reply to this. I went back to my room, accompanied by Gräuben. It was she who took it upon herself to pack everything I needed in a little portmanteau. She was no more excited than if I had been going on a trip to Lübeck or Heligoland. 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 Anyway, moving on. Her little hands moved about hurriedly. She chatted calmly. She gave me eminently sensible reasons for our expedition. She delighted me, and yet I felt extremely angry with her. Now and then I nearly lost my temper, but she took no notice and went on with her work as methodically as ever. Finally, the last strap round the portmanteau was buckled, and I went downstairs. All day, scientific instruments, firearms, electrical apparatus had been arriving. Poor Martha did not know where she was. "Is the master out of his mind?" she asked me. I nodded. "And he's taking you with him?" I nodded again. "Where?" she asked. I pointed towards the center of the earth. "Into the cellar?" exclaimed the old servant. "No," I said, "farther down than that." Night fell. I had ceased to be conscious of the passage of time. "I shall see you tomorrow morning," said my uncle. "We leave at 6 sharp." At 10 o'clock, I slumped onto my bed. During the night, my fears took hold of me again. I dreamed about abysses all the time. I became delirious. I felt the professor's strong hand gripping me, dragging me along, pulling me into chasms and quicksands. I kept hurtling into bottomless abysses with the increasing velocity of bodies dropping through space. My life had become an interminable fall. I awoke at 5, worn out with fatigue and emotion. I went down to the dining room. My uncle was at table, eating a hearty breakfast. I looked at him with horror and disgust. But Gräuben was there, so I said nothing. I could not eat anything. At 5:30, there was a rumble of wheels outside. A big carriage had arrived to take us to the station at Altona. Before long, it was filled with my uncle's parcels. "Where's your box?" he asked me. "It's ready," I replied in a faltering voice. "Be quick and bring it down then, or you'll make us miss the train." It was now obviously impossible to fight against my fate. I went back up to my room, and, letting my portmanteau slide down the stairs, I hurried after it. At that moment, my uncle was solemnly handing over the reins of the house to Gräuben. My pretty little Virlandaise was as calm as ever. She kissed her guardian, but she could not restrain a tear as she touched my cheek with her sweet lips. "Gräuben!" I exclaimed. "Go, Axel, dear, go," she said. "You are leaving your betrothed, but when you come back you will find your wife." I pressed her in my arms and then took my seat in the carriage. From the door, Martha and Gräuben waved a final farewell. Then the 2 horses, at a whistle from the driver, set off at a gallop along the road to Altona. That's the end of chapter 7. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Bedtime Stories. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to the library's YouTube channel. You can also find out what's happening at the library by visiting us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Or you can always just go to the library's website. I hope to see you again for the next episode of Bedtime Stories, but until then, be well and sleep well.